What's up everybody, Kinetic here and welcome back to First Look Fridays. This is the Need for Speed gameplay review this Friday, and this is kind of special to me because I'm actually a really big fan of cars and car culture and racing games. It's been a long time since I've played a good racing game. The last time I played a Need for Speed game was actually the Need for Speed Underground game, which feels like it was forever ago. And so it's kind of fun and appropriate that I come back to Need for Speed here in this reboot because it feels very much like what I remember from playing and enjoying about Need for Speed Underground, plus so much more. Now Need for Speed in 2015 is a really fun mix and brings a lot of variety in gameplay to this game that it never really feels like you're pinned into any one type of racing sensation. You may be doing a sprint or a time trial, which will be oftentimes like a point A to point B type of thing, or maybe a circuit, and then other times you'll just be hanging out the back end in some kind of drifting event or drift train or something like that, and then suddenly there's cops involved and they just suddenly catch you racing around the place, and then it becomes an outlaw situation. You gotta outrun the cops as well as do whatever event that you are trying to complete. It can get really chaotic, but that's what makes it really fun too, because you'll be playing and you'll completely forget what kind of race you were actually in. You're just simply racing all over the place, and it can be a lot of fun. So because of all that, because of the randomness and the variety, the game really does a great job, I think, of keeping it so fresh that you never really feel like it's getting repetitive at any point in time. There's a really nice mixture and variety of different racing types, plus there's little side event things that you can do as well, like you can collect pictures of different locations, do a donut and collect points by doing that, or even find some free parts in the backs of trucks, which is kind of cool. There's a little bit of busy work in this game, but it's not nearly as overwhelming, like all these things you gotta do all over the map like you might expect from, I don't know, an Assassin's Creed game or something like that. You don't have to worry about collecting towers or anything like that. These are little bits of busy work, but they're actually quite fun, I think, because it's kept to a minimum. Now, from what I remember of playing Need for Speed Underground back in the day, it was much more of a kind of simplistic and arcade style of game, but this new Need for Speed is a much closer and more interesting hybrid of arcade and simulation. It certainly is arcade, but it's not nearly as arcade as, for example, Ridge Racer, nor is it as simulation as you might expect from maybe Gran Turismo or Forza or something like that, but it does a really good job of just kind of hitting it in the middle there. You've got it as almost as simple as you want it if you don't want to get into it deep with the tuning, but there is a lot of really cool depth to the customization, not just in the way that your car looks, because there's some really great options here for changing color, creating custom decals, and all sorts of stuff for your car, but there's also a really nice level of depth to tuning your car and upgrading it, the handling and how it performs as well. It's one of the best hybrids I've seen in racing games. The big problem, though, that I have with this game, is that they came so close to making it, almost perfect when it came to that hybrid, except for one major issue. There is no manual option. Why is there no manual option? I cannot believe that they did not include manual shifting in this game. I mean, I can't remember if it was in Underground, honestly, but for me personally, it's like every racing game, even Mario Kart, should have a manual shifting option. It shouldn't be mandatory any more than automatic should be mandatory, but it is mandatory to play an automatic vehicle in this game, and it's like I got over it pretty quickly because the game makes up for it in so many other ways, but oh man, what a shocker right there, man. I really wanted and expected to find manual shifting in this game. That's a huge misstep for this series. But in a really weird and twisted sort of way, I actually have to kind of praise Need for Speed because, like I said, on the one hand, I am kind of bummed out that there's no manual shifting option, but everything else just seems to kind of make up for it. Like I said, I mean, it's got fantastic graphics. This is one of the most beautiful games that I've played, period. Not just racing games, but this is a really fantastic looking game for the PlayStation 4 and runs at a really smooth frame rate 95% of the time. The sound quality is also superb. The sound of the engines and the tires squealing and everything like that is really good. The music choice as well, while kind of predictable, sort of mixtures of like techno, drum and bass, hip hop and stuff like that, isn't as obnoxious as some previous games that I've played. Like some songs, like you've heard them twice or even one time and you never want to hear that song again. But I haven't experienced that at all with the music so far here in Need for Speed, and there is actually a skip track button, which is nice too. The graphics and sound, of course, are just, you know, sort of the sauce on top of the meat, and the real meat of the game is, of course, the variety of different racing events. And then on the side, you've got the potatoes, which I think is the story. The cutscenes do a really good job of adding that extra layer and that extra flavor to the game that I think makes it much more interesting, adds to the production and quality of this Need for Speed reboot. And then on top of that, you add in some real-life racing icons, like for example Ken Block in the mix, and that's even more wow factor. Without all that, yeah, it would still be a pretty good game, but I like the immersion that these story cutscenes bring in. I'm blown away by the fact that I see these guys walking around in real life, living, breathing people around my car in the game. That's badass. The sense of progression is actually really enjoyable as well in Need for Speed. It's kind of almost what you might expect as well. You're going to start in a low-beat vehicle. You start off with a selection of 3 cars. You got the Honda Civic, you got an old Mustang, and a Subaru 4-wheel drive. And I chose the Subaru because, well, I like Subaru as a car maker in general, and I also think that it was the coolest looking car out of the 3. And it works. It totally got me by, and I imagine that all 3 vehicles feel awkward at first and don't really feel that great as far as racing, but then a really cool side effect of that is it kind of forces you to figure out, okay, now how do I tune this to make it feel good for me, my personal racing style? Do I want a grippy car, something that doesn't slide around a lot, or do I just want 4 wheels on oil, you know, sliding all over the place? And that's where you start messing around with the tuning and you start figuring out, okay, how much do I need to push it into grip more or into drift more? And then as you add more car parts and upgrades to your vehicle, you get even more options for tuning that handling and that power in your car. And again, this level of customization isn't really simulation per se, but if you're into simulation racers, this is going to feel like simulation light, I guess. If anything, I can forgive the lack of manual shifting for at least that they have this customization in the cars themselves. If I just bought a car and my only customization option was the decals, that would suck. But I can tune the power and the handling so much more, and it adds a lot of fun factor to this game. Now, you've probably already heard that this Need for Speed has rubber banding AI, which is a bummer. That's right alongside the lack of manual shifting option. The rubber banding AI is going to slow down if it gets too far ahead of you, is going to speed up just like all of a sudden it's got a rocket attached to the back of it or something like that if you were way ahead of it. It's not that bad, but it is definitely noticeable, and I think that that's something they hopefully should, if they don't already have plans to, tune down in perhaps a future patch. Just tone it down. Tone down the rubber banding AI, and this game will be much better off for it. Honestly though, the AI in general is not that big of an issue. It doesn't irritate me any more than it, I guess, pleases me. So it kind of balances out. But who needs AI when you've got multiplayer online racing? That's what this new Need for Speed game really is. And talking about hybrids again, it's really interesting to me, and I have to applaud them that they've actually done a really good job of blending and creating a very blurred line between what feels like a single-player game and then what also feels like an online racing game. But one thing's for sure, you start adding a bunch of other people racing in the town where you're racing, and things can get really chaotic. Sometimes frustrating, but most of the time actually quite hilarious and adds to the fun of the game. especially if you bring in friends. I have to say, of course, anytime you add friends to a game that you're playing, it's going to be more fun. But for this game especially, oh my god, I was up all night last night, for example, playing with a couple of dudes that I knew and that just got Need for Speed, and we were racing around, messing with people, challenging each other, trolling the cops. We just had hours and hours of fun in this game. Multiplayer is not for everybody, I understand, but if you can do it, if you can get your friends involved in this game, it's so much more fun. So much more fun. Again, it's totally up to you though. You can completely ignore the fact, and I think that you can even set privacy settings that people joining your game is only by invite only or something like that. But really, I don't think that it's fair, and you're really not doing yourself any favors or positive services by trying to cut out the multiplayer from this game. It adds so much more than it actually takes, and yes, always online can suck in games, especially if your internet isn't that good, but again, it adds so much more to the fun and the flavor of the game than it actually would take away. The multiplayer for Need for Speed is a major factor in how much fun you're going to have and how memorable this game is going to be. But like I said, even without the multiplayer, it's still a fun game. I just highly recommend that you go out there and race with randoms, or hopefully race with some buddies. And that wraps up this First Look Friday's Need for Speed gameplay review. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I do these each and every Friday for kind of a random game that I just kind of happen to pick up and play. Usually it's a relatively new game or that's recently been updated. Sometimes that's the thing as well. But I want to know what you guys think down in the comment section about this reboot for Need for Speed. And if any of you are already playing or have plans to play Need for Speed here on the PlayStation 4, then hit me up, send me a message here on YouTube or over on Twitter. I'll give you my PlayStation Network name, and yeah, we'll go out there and kick some asphalt. Until then, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss the next video. Thanks again for watching. My name is Kinetic, and I'll see you next time.